Well, the lovely and Nordhaus-Bike, Bike. How do you pronounce
Nordhaus-Bike.
Bike? Right. Well, we met over a Zoom conference, astrology conference over the winter or the spring, and we just clicked. And she is very, very qualified and skilled. I looked at her website, and she has many. She has a blog. She has a lot of classes. She has a book, and she's also an artist. So a very accomplished astrologer, been doing it for a very long time, and she's going to present a talk on the Great Aquarian Leap, if I have that correct. So I recommend you look at her website. It's got a lot of great information, and take it away, Anne. We look forward to all this wonderful information so needed at this time.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you, Ted. And before we get started, I wanted to extend my thanks very much to Asheville Friends of Astrology for welcoming me this evening. It's such a delight to be with you tonight. And one of the upsides, as we know, of this last year is the opportunity to do these sorts of Zoom conversations. And so somebody like me can meet all of you, even though I live in Chicago. So thank you for welcoming me into your homes and your hearts tonight. Thank you as well to Ronnie for inviting me, making the first connection. It was a delight to meet you, and I'm just so glad that we clicked. And to Ted as well, thank you so much. We had a rehearsal, everybody, before this, about a few weeks ago, and Ted was so kind to lead me through it, and I'm so glad he's with us tonight because he's on vacation, but he's making an exception to be with us tonight. So many, many thanks for helping me with the tech end of things. So for everybody who's joining us, I know many of you are astrologers, not everybody is, but I'm going to proceed as if we have kind of a mixed level of understanding this evening. And I would like to actually start out by taking us into the realm of air, because if we're going to talk about the Great Aquarian Leap and the sign Aquarius, we're going to be talking about air. We need to think about air. So I'd like to start with 3 quotes that will help put us in the mood. We who are lovers of astrology know the 3 air signs are Gemini and Libra and Aquarius. So here goes. First, to put you in the mood for this whole Aquarian type of vibe, Anne Frank, a Gemini born June 12, 1929, who said, and keep the vibe of Aquarius in your heart and your mind as I read these to you. You'll see these themes come back tonight. I keep my ideals because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. And because she was a Gemini, and often Gemini, sometimes things comes in 2s because they're mercurial. I'll read you a second one from her, which is, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And isn't that an Aquarian sentiment if ever there was one? So our next quote is from a Libra. This is Eleanor Roosevelt, born October 11th, 1884 in New York. And she wrote, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And what are we talking about with Aquarius, if not the future? And third, we have our Aquarius person. This is the songwriter and singer Carole King in Aquarius, born February 9th, 1942. And she wrote, do the things you believe in the name of love, and know that you're not alone. And this is a person who also wrote a song called Only Love is Real, as well as You've Got a Friend. And again, what could be more Aquarian than the sentiment simply of the titles of those songs, let alone the lyrics of them. So that being said, I believe I've now been made presenter. So I think I should be able to share my screen if I need to. Feel air on your body, really tune into this idea of air. So I'm going to start here first. I want to share my screen and put this image up for you. So bear with me one moment. Sharing, okay. Let me grab this image for you. Oops. Here we go. This is the Helix Nebula of the constellation Aquarius. And what could be more fabulous and perfect for us tonight? Peace will guide the planets. Love will steer the stars. This is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius. Oh, God. Here we are. Harmony and understanding, sympathy and trust abounding. No more falsehoods or derisions. Golden living dreams of visions. Mystic crystal revelation. And the mind's true liberation. Aquarius. Let's welcome it in. It's here. I did some research on the Age of Aquarius song, by the way, which I wanted to share with you. It's an interesting story because this song meant #1 on the Billboard chart, April 12th, 1969. It really has the vibe of this new age in it. Interestingly, it was written by, lyrics are by James Rado, an Aquarius, and Jerome Ragney, a Virgo. And there's an interesting signature with this song. There's this Aquarius Virgo combo platter going on with it. And the music was by Galt McDermott, a Sagittarius, born December 18th, 1928. Interestingly, the fifth dimension mirrors the vibrations of these three fellows because the original group, there's some folks still performing, Florence LaRue among them, who was an original. But anyway, the original five, Marilyn McCoo, Billy Davis Jr., let's see, Florence LaRue, and Lamont McLemore and Ronald Townsend. So of this, 5 people, 2 of them were Aquarians. Ronald Townsend, Aquarian, as well as Florence LaRue. And then we have another air sign with it, Marilyn McCoo, a Libra. And then we have what I would think of as a sort of an honorary air sign. Lamont McLemore is a Virgo. Even though it's an air sign, it's the lightest, as we all know, of the earth signs because it's ruled by Mercury. So there's a lightness there. And so we get this combination of the Virgo with the Aquarius, which is super fun. And then the 5th member, Billy Davis Jr., was a Cancer. So we have an interesting mix of energies with them. And just lovely that this came in the 60s and really remains for so many people an anthem. And I wanted to talk about this because when we discuss the Age of Aquarius, the Great Aquarian Leap, any of these things, you know, anytime I tell people about this talk that I do, the first question is, you gonna play that song? Or, yeah, Age of Aquarius, man. It's very cool. It's really in the consciousness, even though that song dates more than 50 years ago now. It's important really as an indicator and a forerunner of this age. In a lot of ways, we know that as astrologers that culture and things in society really help bring in the new. And this is one strong thing that really did, and it's enduring even to this day. Before I get to some more about the astrology, I want to give a little preview of what we're doing tonight. So in talking about the Age of Aquarius and making our Great Aquarian Leap together, I want to point out that astrology is so wonderful for so many things, but one thing is about helping us understand cycles. And so often one of the things we're looking at is the shorter cycles, maybe with the lunar cycle, monthly, or the annual cycle of the sun, or even perhaps the 12-year cycle of Jupiter, or the almost 30-year cycle of Saturn. However, what we're looking at here is some of the super, super long cycles, 2,000-year plus cycles, as well as 26,000-year cycles. And I just think it's incredibly cool that astrology can help us do these massive amounts of time and give us a sense of what these cycles are all about. So we're going to be talking about the ages, meaning the Age of Aquarius, the Age of Pisces that is just passing now. I want to focus on what I would suggest is a very official stepping into it, even though we've been building up to it for many years. There's a lot of discussion about when did it really begin and that sort of thing. But we're going to take a look at that first. And then I want to talk a bit more about Aquarius and share some more information. It's not only the 11th sign of the zodiac, it's an air sign. And it's ruled, and I'm going to be using so-called modern astrology. I'll be talking about the planet Uranus, which I think is so perfect for this conversation. It has such futuristic, modernistic qualities to it. And then towards the end, I'll be talking about, for us as astrologers and all those who are attending tonight who may not be astrologers but are super interested in it and work with it, what does that mean for us? What is our calling or our mandate in a new era, and what are the opportunities that we have? And then towards the very end, I have, we could call it an experiment or a audience participation moment. I'm going to do a guided meditation for us to help us individually begin to make our personal leap into the age of Aquarius. And then if you want a little more music, I have some nice music at the end as well. So I can play that if you want to get 60'd up again. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's talk a little bit about the ages, then I want to jump into that. So I have some images to show you. And basically what I have is, I don't have a PowerPoint for you. This is more of a conversation as well as me showing you some images. So you'll notice that I'm not putting slides up right away, but there will be images along the way. And at some point I will have the screen sharing off and I'll just be talking to you. So at this point, I want to give a little bit of background on the ages before I show the next image. So probably many of you who study astrology have already read about or heard about the ages. And even if one is not a big astrology devotee, people know about the age of Aquarius. We've been hearing about it a long time, the age of Pisces that preceded it, and the other ages as part of what is called the great year or the perfect year, which is 25,920 years. This is something that Plato talked about, and in his writings, they speak about that. So what is that great year or perfect year? It is the cycle it takes for the Earth to precess through all 12 signs of the zodiac, and it breaks down to 2,160 years per sign. We could also remind ourselves that there is some overlap. It's not like we press a button and say, okay, here's the date. We've been leading up to this for a really long time. Some might argue since the Renaissance. I'll show you some things that make a good case for that tonight. We also might think since the time of Francis Bacon, when he wrote the publication, The New Atlantis, speaking about the Western Hemisphere and the promise that held for what might be going on in terms of opportunities for bringing in progress for humanity and for new culture and for developing into a new era. And people who are writing about this, people like Francis Bacon and such, would have been well educated. And often the people we hear about, Plato, for example, these are folks who would have been mystically inclined. They would have been initiates. They would have known all the latest thinking, including astrology. Many of them might very well have been astrologers and been watching that or worked with astrologers and what they do. So I'd like to suggest that, how do we know an age begins? How can we believe that? What can we use? And we're good astrologers. So of course, we're going to look at the sky. And so my recommendation is to pay attention to what I would call sky signals. So what's going on in the heavens? How can we get a sense of, wow, is the age of Aquarius here? Is it coming? Well, I will be showing you a couple things in just a moment. Let me pull my images up here. So one of the things that might be an indicator that might say, pay attention. Whenever we as astrologers see a chart, when we see a bunch of stuff in one place, it's like a big billboard that says, pay attention to this. So all of us who have stellia in our charts know it's a place of huge emphasis. So one of the most important things we might think about in terms of an indicator for a new age beginning would be, has there been a stellium that seems to have interesting commentary regarding a new age, a new era? Another thing that would give us a good signal would be what's going on with the so-called grand conjunctions, also sometimes called the Great Conjunction, when Saturn and Jupiter come together. So let's talk a little bit about Jupiter and Saturn. Let's see. I have a graphic for you that I'm going to share my screen to show you. Here we go. So what's a grand conjunction? So for the folks who may be a little bit newer to astrology who are joining us tonight, here's some symbols that explain what a grand conjunction is. So on the left is the astrological symbol for Jupiter with a plus sign, meaning we're going to bring these two things together. And on the right-hand side is the astrological symbol for Saturn. I'd also like to point out for anybody who's involved in additional metaphysical or spiritual or mystical disciplines, this is the shorthand or the symbology that's also used for many, many other disciplines, including Kabbalah as well as alchemy. And so when we engage in our work as astrologers, we are in that same group of people using these same mystical tools and symbols for our work. So it's the same language. Now, if you look on the left, that symbol for Jupiter, it's in purple. And I did that basically to indicate that's one of the colors associated with the planet Jupiter, Jupiter being the Roman name for the same god, Zeus. So king of the gods. Well, purple being the royal color. Another color that's often associated with Jupiter is red, fire, fiery Zeus being mad and sending down a thunderbolt, to dispense divine justice. On the right, we have the Saturn symbol. And I did that in sort of a brownish, earthish color. This is a planet that rules Capricorn, and Capricorn is an earth sign, and it reminds us, Saturn always does, of earthy, material, practical realities. So how do we mash these two things together? That's what we have to do every 20 years. Every 20 years, these two planets come together. And I'm going to talk in just a little bit about the wonderful grand conjunction that we had in December 2020. But in the meantime, why do these matter? Why are they an important sky signal, as I'm calling it? Well, in part, these happen every 20 years. And these are what astrology calls the social planets. And I laugh whenever I read that because I think, are they calling each other and chatting? Well, I guess they are. Every 20 years they get together and say, okay, let's meet. But the social planets, meaning they affect society. These two planets determine what the next 20 years is going to look like in the ways that we organize society. How do we order it? How do we put these two energies together? Jupiter wants to expand stuff. Saturn wants to contract and crystallize and have order. We have to somehow bring these two disparate things together. And it's a little bit easier when they come together at that conjunction. It's like they give us a new mandate. They tell us, okay, here's how we're going to do it. Because these are both leadership signs. If you look back at the Greek mythology, these are both leaders of the gods at one time. So the other thing that astrology reminds us is that grand conjunctions, every time they come, every 20 years, they signal the start of a new era. It's a new 20-year period. And so they affect social structures. So if you look back 20 years, for example, the last one was in May of 2000. It was in Taurus. So it was in an earth sign. And then 20 years before that, we had a so-called triple conjunction, meaning they met up 3 times because of retrograde motion. That was in 1980 and 81. They came together in Libra. It was the one exception in a 200-year period of earth signs. What's interesting about these two coming together, the 1980-81 set, and then the May 2001, those are both in signs ruled by Venus. So it's been interesting. For 40 years, we've had some emphasis on values, money in many respects, the go-go 80s and that sort of thing, as well as relationships.
Want to hear this thing about the Age of Aquarius?
So it's interesting to think about these 20-year periods, and we hear about it in history as well. There seems to be a cycle, 20 years, 20 years, 20 years. I want to show you a little bit more. Let's go back and take a look at some of the ages. So I have an image here for you for Pisces. Let's see. This is a watercolor I did a few years ago. This is the sign Pisces. And so here we have the 2 fish, and they're swimming in their 2 different directions. So one taking the high road, if you will, swimming up against the current, doing the work spiritually and mystically and in life. And the other sort of going with the flow, both of which we need. In the Pisces age, I want to mention, we had these sky signals that I've been talking about. So February 7th, let's see, in late February of the year 7 BCE, 6 planets came together in a stellium in Pisces. And then that same year, so that's February of -7, if you will. And then we had a grand conjunction, May 27th in 7 BCE. So we had both of these indicators and they came in that same year. So this period was really pushing toward and signaling what was going to be happening in terms of the next change. It was the age of Aries moving over into the age of Pisces. And so what we have is a shift from a so-called Iron Age into a very different time. And the birth of Jesus is very often pointed to as one of the harbingers of this next era. Pisces gives us symbolism of the fish. We see the fish very strongly associated with Christianity, which was a faith tradition that was very much a part of this Pisces age that is now drawing to a close. Ages before that, one of the clues that's typically looked at to get a sense of what were these ages like is in things such as civilization. So we see archaeological evidence, artistic evidence. So for example, before that Pisces age, we had an age of Aries. And so there's a very common motif of having rams being part of Egyptian art, for example. And even the pharaoh Ramses being named Ramses, that comes actually from a Celtic word. That's not just me applying some, me putting some English on top of, ancient culture. It actually came out of a Celtic word associated with the ram. That was also the time of the Iron Age, and iron being associated with Mars and with Aries. The sacred fire, as well as the planet Mars. This is very martial, a warlike era in a lot of ways. Before that would have been the age of Taurus, approximately 4000 to 2000 BCE. And that was an interesting time because we saw a flowering of the arts as well as the preponderance of artwork that would have had bull motifs in them as opposed to ram motifs. It's interesting, the biblical story as well about the golden calf, a calf being very much associated with something such as Taurus, the earthy, if you will, old religion versus the new religions and the new changes that were coming in. And also the fact that it was gold, the idea of Taurus, that era being very much about security, money, gold, also wealth being held in cattle, which is a very interesting thing. In the Gemini age before that, there was expansion of migration as well as a rise of civilizations. And interestingly enough, commerce and writing. We see cuneiform writings and those sorts of things. So these are some of the interesting things that we can see that really help give us more clues about what's going on with the ages. We just start to see natural changes, even if people aren't aware of what's going on astrologically. So I have, let's see, I'd like to show you now in this Aquarian age. So there's been a sense or a feeling of it coming. And actually for hundreds of years, the people at the vanguard have been talking about that this age is coming. And as astrologers, we know that these cycles come. So various sources have spoken of it. In the 60s, there was a sense of it. So we had a really interesting sky signal in 1962 that I want to share with you. So this is a chart for a part of the 3-day period. It's like the height of it. This is February 4th, 1962. Look in the red circle that I have highlighted here. You can see every single inner planet was in Aquarius. This is February 4th, 1962. This is the moment of the new moon that occurred in Aquarius. So if you look closely, you can see here's the sun symbol, here's the moon symbol. They're together at 15 degrees, 43 minutes of Aquarius, as well as all this other stuff with them. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, every single inner planet all together makes for a quite powerhouse, amazing time. If you were around at the time, you can think back to, gee, what were you doing then? And if you weren't, that's okay, but you might look up the history, which is a very interesting thing to take a look at. So this gives us not just any stellium. This is a big honking stellium. This is 7 things. Also for the astrologers in the house, I want to point out the aspect chart. I left it in. I usually take this sort of thing off, but I left it in because look at that. everything in there is red. Everything is a tough angle. It's a square, it's a conjunction, or it's an opposition. So it tells you, woo, this is some big energy. Oh my goodness. The moon would have passed out fairly quickly by sometime on February 5th. It was out. It was the 3rd to the 5th of February, by the way, that year that the moon was there. That gave us the perfect 7, and then it moved on. And also I will point out the fact that when we have 7 of anything from a mystical or spiritual or astrological standpoint, that's another thing. Pay attention, 7 being a big hoo-ha number that tells us, woo, this could have some big significance. And yes, it did. So I want to talk a little bit about as well what happened in 1962. So there were people paying attention to this big stellium. A lot of folks still talk about this, and folks who are here tonight who were around then and lived through the 60s and the 70s and the following decades. There was a real sense of promise and hope then. There was this sense of the space race. Let's get into outer space. Let's send up a rocket. Let's put people on the moon. I mean, what could be more Aquarian than technology and exploring outer space? I mean, talk about far out, man. Like so far out, it's out of sight, literally, as those phrases of the time say. Well, the thing in 1962 was there is an astrologer named Raymond Bernard. He's also known for his mystical work, but he, in a book called Messages from the Celestial Sanctum, talked about his experiences in meditation. And he even announced in his notebook, it's been printed up now in that book, Messages from the Celestial Sanctum, he announced, this is when the Aquarian Age begins. He got that in meditation. There were so many people who were so sure of this, and they felt it so strongly. And in many respects, we can look at the 60s and realize this was a time of tremendous change. Now, we know that some of that was related, of course, to the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions that happened in the middle of the 60s, but nevertheless, there was a huge amount of change that was in the air. So it begs the question, so, you know, what happened? For those who are hopeful about the 60s and who very much wanted these changes, who really had prepared the way, I think in many respects, I talked to a lot of people who are really disappointed. Like, what happened? What happened to that promise of the 60s, the 70s? So much was going in a progressive direction. And then it kind of didn't, and things shifted. And then we hit the 80s, and there was a palpable change in the air. And we've had 40 years since then of, you know, pushback on the 60s and the promise and the potential flowering of that time. Never mind that we had the rock musical Hair and the wonderful song Age of Aquarius. It's like, where's the rest of it? Well, I would like to suggest that the biggest difficulty we faced, and the reason it didn't really take off at that time, was we had that wonderful stellium. It was incredibly powerful, more powerful even than the one that we saw back in 7 BCE. However, we were missing a piece that would have made it possible for it to really take off. Well, what happened last December 2020, gave us that missing piece. So let's talk a little bit about what happened last December. All the folks who've been paying attention to astrology, that's everybody here on this call, knows that we had some big important stuff that went on in December. So Saturn changed signs. Saturn went into Aquarius December 16th of 2020. And then Jupiter followed soon after, 3 days later, December 19th. So we had them getting primed into position for coming together. And they were leaving heavy, difficult Capricorn. It's part of why 2020 was the way 2020 was. It was, you know, it was super heavy, asking us to do a lot of work. So then the sun entered Capricorn, and it was December 21st of 2020, this last year. And that brought us, as we know, the solstice. Well, so then 8 hours later, after the sun entered Capricorn, bringing the solstice, Jupiter met up with Saturn in a grand conjunction. That was at 12:20 p.m. That's US Central Time. And one of the things that was so fun about this is it was in the news a lot. People were thinking about it and talking about it and really paying attention. And the media really picked up on this. There's a lot of excitement. And one of the things that I feel also helped this whole situation was because of where the planets were all summer and autumn, you could see the two planets. If you went out, Jupiter's so nice and bright in the night sky, and you could see it drawing, Saturn and Jupiter drawing together, retrograde motion and then unretrograding and moving forward. And honestly, it was just so exciting. I don't know if any of you were able to get outside on that day, but I did go out and watch the time of the conjunction because it was still, the lighting was such that the sun had gone down and you could see it. It was just palpable excitement. It was really wonderful. So we had this mix of the winter solstice as well as this grand conjunction. So the winter solstice, and I'm calling it winter, by the way, because I think most of us on this presentation tonight who called in on the Zoom call are in the Northern Hemisphere. So in particular, that solstice is so key for the Northern Hemisphere because the light has come to the smallest amount of the year, and then it starts to grow after that solstice. We are literally in the depths, the beginning, the darkest time. And then the light comes and reminds us every year about the invincible sun, or Sol Invictus, if you will. And so it's a power day on the solstice. It's an extreme day along with the summer solstice because those are the times of least amount of light or most amount of light. It's pulling us, really stretching us, as opposed to the equinoxes where it's the equal thing. It's like, yes, we're starting a new season, but it's less extreme. And so this solstice is big every year, brings us a new sign of the zodiac is Capricorn every year. And then it brings us, we get a new month, and then we get a new season. And up here in the in the Northern Hemisphere, it's winter. I also want to mention that December 25th historically has been associated with the birth of avatars of various ages. And so that's right on top of that solstice point. And so what we get with the birth of an avatar, the most recent one being the story of Jesus' birth, being the nativity on December 25th. When you get that, it's code for anybody who studies the stars, anybody who's a mystic or an initiate. We know it's saying, okay, we're aligning this person with the rebirth of the light and the birth of a new cycle or the birth of a new age. So we had that with the birth of Jesus. It also occurred, many, many others. I'll give you some names. The god Horus, the son of Isis and Osiris in ancient Egypt. And Osiris as well was said to have been born at December 25th. Krishna, Zoroaster, Mithra, part of the Mithraic mysteries back in ancient Rome. Prometheus and Heracles, as well as Dionysus and Hermes. Very interesting. Hermes being the Greek name for the planet Mercury, and very associated with astrology, because before we knew about Uranus, the planet for all of us was Mercury, the mercurial quality, as well as Mercury being part of alchemy, transformation, change, and what is astrology, if not helping people change, transmute the lower things, turn lead into gold on a spiritual plane by using the stars and the cycles. So on this winter solstice we had in 2020, so we had all of this energy about births of avatars, the start of a new cycle, plus this very special grand conjunction. And when we get these grand conjunctions, they happen every 20 years. We might get a little blasé about them, but this was a really big deal one. This was a bigger deal than usual because not only were they exactly with each other in longitude, by degree and minute, minute, they were right on top of each other vertically by declination. So I have the chart here, which I'd like to show you. Let's see, share screen. So here is the 1623 grand conjunction. What we had in 2020 was the closest grand conjunction since this one in 1623. You can see here they are, Jupiter and Saturn right next to each other, 6 degrees, 36 minutes of arc in Leo. And if you look over here, I left these tables in so we can all see it. So if you see here's the symbol of Jupiter down at the lower right, and then the symbol of Saturn. And if you look at this, here's a declination, meaning where they located vertically, 19 degrees north, and it's 19 degrees and 14 minutes of arc for Jupiter, in 19 degrees north and 19 minutes of arc for Saturn. So they're only 5 minutes of arc away from each other. They're like super close, you know? It's like when you take, you know, baseballs or any two things and you bring them close together, they were like right on top of each other, super close. The one downside to this thing in 1623 was, look how close these two planets, if you look at the chart wheel, see how close they are to the sun? It would have been pretty much impossible to see them when they made their conjunction because they were so close to the sun. They would have gone under the horizon shortly after the sun, which was still shedding so much light. It would have been really tough to see that. We were lucky though, because we got to see it. It was really fun. It was really easily visible. So let me show you that chart.
Excuse me, Anne.
Yeah.
This is Ronnie. We're so interested in what you're sharing, but you're getting mute every so often. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that, but we're skipping some of what you're saying.
I'm sorry. And the next time it happens, speak up instantly and I'll see if something's happening that's causing that. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now, Ronnie?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. It's just every so often there's a few words that just go into space.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Here's the 2020 grand conjunction. This is what we just experienced collectively as a planet, December 21st. You can see Jupiter and Saturn up here, 0 degrees, 29 minutes of arc. And if you look back down here at the declination, you can see again, these are super close. These are about 6 minutes of arc. They're southern as opposed to northern this time. But again, super close, both longitudinally and latitudinally. And that's another sky signal that tells mystics, astrologers, anybody who's, you know, being guided by the stars and other such things, that this was a very important one, a really powerful one that's really important to pay attention to. And so this gives us part of that missing piece. This gives us the grand conjunction in Aquarius that we didn't get in the 60s. It's like it's a little bit late. So we got that little taste in 1962, and now so many years later, here it came almost 60 years later to fulfill the promise and remind us, wow, okay, let's go back into it. And I think it's really cool that this grand conjunction was not just in an air sign, it was in Aquarius. So along with this grand conjunction coming at this time at the solstice, we got this bonus piece, which I've alluded to, which is this idea of the great air mutation, which
It's happening again.
I'm sorry.
It's happening now.
Okay.
We just lost words.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know if this.
And I want to say though that I'm not getting it. Everything's coming clear, so it might be on your end, Ronnie.
Yeah, me either.
Okay, thank you.
Me either.
Me neither.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe it's just my computer. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. No, thank you for bringing it to my attention. And Ted, we are recording, right? So we'll have the recording.
We are, yes.
Very good. So if anything is missed, you know, please go and hear the rest of it. And I am sorry, Ronnie, if tech is not behaving. How Aquarian, a little disruption. Yeah. You know, and by the way, while I have this up on the screen, I don't have an image up. This is what I'm using as my screensaver. I think you can all see this, the woman with the skeleton. I wanted to mention that I chose that specifically because it's real Aquarian in a way, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. I wanted to show you really quickly that what we got, I was talking about the air mutation. Okay, so these grand conjunctions come together. They happen basically for about 200 years, we get them in the same element. So we're going to be talking about elements in a little bit, but what we've just come out of is a 200-year period of these grand conjunctions coming in earth signs, with the exception of that one that I mentioned to you that came in Libra in 1980 and 81. So that's the other thing that was almost dragging down the age of Aquarius, in the sense that the grand conjunctions were coming in heavy earth, asking us to still do some stuff, as opposed to letting us really take flight with air. So we got this wonderful bonus piece with the grand conjunction in December 2020, because it came in air, it came in Aquarius. I want to show you something here. The last time that we had these grand conjunctions, last time we had it in air was quite some time ago. So for example, here's one. This is in 1226. This is a chart that I'm showing to you because before that 1623 one, this is 400 years before that, this was the closest one before that in terms of not just longitude. Obviously, it's always exact longitude. So you can see it's 2 degrees, 58 minutes of arc in Aquarius. But see, it's really close in declination again. Super close, just 2 degrees of arc different. 20 degrees, 1 minute of arc for Jupiter, and 20 degrees, 3 minutes of arc for Saturn. So right on top of each other.
We don't see your screen anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Thank you so much for speaking up. Let me put that up for you. Thank you. You can see it now?
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much for speaking up. That was Chuck, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes, much appreciated. I'll leave this up for a moment longer so you can see this. Here again are Saturn and Jupiter together at the 2 degree mark, 58 minutes of arc in Aquarius, and very close in declination. I would also like to point out, if you'll notice, see they're a little bit farther away from the sun here. This was the most easily visible one up until December 2020. So this 1226 grand conjunction in Aquarius is really interesting in terms of, that's what people are talking about when the media took hold of it and said, oh, it's the Christmas star. This is what they're talking about, is how visible, how easily it was to see this at the time. It would have been visible in the wee hours, obviously. So the sun would set, and I mean, we'd see it before that, but they would rise in the east before the sun had risen. So you'd be able to see it then. So that's the 1226 one. So we have these so-called cycles within cycles. I mentioned the great air mutation. And so what that is, most of you who are astrologers probably already know this. And so that's the pattern of the grand conjunctions happening each 200 years in a different element. So we had from 1802 until 2000, we had the earth element. And before that, 1603 to 1782, we had the fire element. And before that, we had water from 1425 to 1583. And they go in a regular cycle like that: water, fire, earth, air. So we've now reached the air period. And that's going to be from 2020, all the grand conjunctions, the meetings of Jupiter and Saturn will happen in those 3 air signs that we heard from: Anne Frank, Gemini, Eleanor Roosevelt, Libra, and then Carole King, Aquarius. These 3 signs are highlighted. All these conjunctions are going to happen in those 3 air signs, with the exception of 2159, when we're going to have what I would call a get ready one. That's going to be in Scorpio. It's a water sign. The next 200 years after the air section is going to be in water. There usually is one oddball like that that's not in the same thing. So this gives us this concept of cycles within cycles. So within this big cycle of an age, more than 2,000 years, we have these mini cycles of the elements. So we get to try on an age through the lens of different elements. So that's what we're going to be doing. And in our lifetimes, all the rest of them are going to be in air. So I also wanted to point out the last time that we had a grand conjunction in Aquarius was during that air period that I gave you. And this would have been in from 1226 to 1405. And so that was the last time we had a grand conjunction in Aquarius was 1405. And that would have been at 2 degrees and 58 minutes of arc in Aquarius. That's the 1226 one. And the 1405 one's really interesting because that was at 23 degrees and 46 minutes of arc in Aquarius. The reason that is important is when we had the new moon in Aquarius this year in 2021, that was at 23 degrees, 17 minutes of arc in Aquarius. It's as if we're picking up where we left off collectively. And we're going to have a couple of full moons, not just one, but we're going to have 2 full moons in Aquarius this year. There's a huge emphasis on Aquarius as if to give us a big oomph. It's going to make up for that almost 60 years after the stellium where we did not have our Aquarian energy. So this year, all 3 of the Mercury retrogrades are in air, starting with the Aquarius Mercury retrograde we had earlier. We're going to get those 2 full moons in Aquarius really soon, July 23rd. And then another one on August 22nd. That's here in 2021. So we get 2 shots to take a look at how we've been doing on starting our great Aquarian leap since the solstice in December 2020, as well as since that new moon in Aquarius that happened earlier this year. We've had 6 months now. How are we doing? Are we on track? Are we being Aquarian about it? Okay. So the significance of this is that we now have this missing piece of the grand conjunction. And it matters because we just didn't have the Aquarian or the air energy with us with these grand conjunctions. So we weren't seeing these changes in culture and society that we can now more easily see. So I would suggest that we can start to see more changes toward the ideals we hold dear that are related to Aquarius, such as making the world a better place, if you will, humanitarian ideals, becoming, one globe and unified, all of and philanthropy, humanitarian action, all of those things that felt like they were stymied a bit, like we had these great ideas, but we just couldn't quite get them put into practice. So that missing piece, combined with this bonus piece of the air mutation is a really wonderful thing for us. It's really moving us ahead quickly. And so I'm going to take a moment now and I want to share a little bit about Aquarius, just to refresh us all, even those of us who are astrologer, it's kind of nice to just hear a little bit of recap. So I'm going to read just a little bit to you, just very short. So every year on January 21st, the sun does enter the astrological sign Aquarius. And in most years, that means we get, a whole month to focus on these Aquarian themes. So what do we have? We have detachment, philanthropy, discovering the truth about ourselves. So as of 2021, however, Aquarius is going to oversee not only its usual astrological month, but it's going to provide this drumbeat or keynote for the entire Aquarian age, 2000 plus years. So it's going to be there in the background, no matter where the sun is or what month we're in. Aquarius inspires in us our views of utopia, that place of ideal perfection, and it inspires us with ways to manifest it. So guidance for how to do it comes through our hopes, our dreams, and our wishes. And now we can begin to pay even more attention to those, the intuition that we have, the things that really tell us, here's what we really came to be doing. And perhaps you were one of those people who was around in 1405 during the last grand conjunction. And it's like, I left something undone. It's time to go back to that, whatever that might be. And we get these impulses because Aquarius has this electrical, airy energy. So we tend to get more insights or inspiration. It comes as sudden things. And it might even be like a greater sense of genius in each of us. Like, what is our individual genius, this thing that we can do for solving problems creatively and constructively? So I have an image for Aquarius to show you, which I will put up now. Here's Aquarius. Oh, beautiful Aquarius. This is again one of my watercolors, and it shows us the symbol. So the Aquarian symbol being the water bearer, and it gives us this human figure holding a very large vessel, and the water flows out of it. This figure is androgynous, and I would suggest as well that androgyny is a term that goes very well with Aquarius in the sense that this is an unusual sign. It sort of transcends things, even such as gender. And I would suggest as well that as astrologers, part of our work moving forward is helping in this new age where identity has shifted so much beyond a female male polarity to a spectrum. And in many cases, very much beyond gender. We've certainly seen the shakeup when Uranus went through Aries, and now we're seeing even more shakeup related to it as it passes through Taurus, which is in some respects the physical nature. So this androgynous figure, it indicates an original spiritual unity of female and male energy. The water represents wisdom, and it flows freely and impersonally to benefit all creation. And the water also reminds us of our need to be compassionate and to avoid Aquarius's tendency toward emotional coldness and the need for friendship to prevent alienation and isolation, which are things that can go very much along with Aquarius, this idea of feeling like an alien or alienating others by being perhaps too detached, too in one's head, not feeling the heart. As we know as astrologers, even though this person is pouring water, Aquarius is an air sign. Aquarius symbolizes each person's or self's uniqueness and independence. And this sign is very, though, associated with friendship. So it's this paradox of how do you be uniquely yourself and have friends? And Aquarians, we all know that those of us who consult with clients, we know the Aquarians tend to have a lot of friends. They're very friendly. Or they have many, many acquaintances, but it's very important to remember, especially Gesundheit, in this age, that the most important friendship, particularly in this new Aquarian age, is the one that we have to the inner self, to the higher self, to divine unity, if you will. Aquarius is also linked with humanitarianism because it has very noble energies that express kindness. They help us to help others in a selfless way, not for gain, not for personal advancement, but to help others in a way simply for the joy of giving and because it is the right thing to do and it raises all of us. And this sign also reminds us that all of us are sisters and brothers. We are part of what I choose to call a great siblinghood. I think the word brotherhood is a bit outdated. And in an Aquarian age, we really are reaching a place in this air period that we need new words. That is part of the challenge we face as astrologers, as well as, as earthlings. How are we going to say words? What are we going to do about languages that have gender in them? It's going to be really interesting to see the creative things that people come up with. So we are called to help one another by expressing our uniqueness and our gifts. And then as we give those, we're the only ones who can give them, however they help everybody. So as I mentioned, Aquarius is an air sign. And I want to show this is the alchemical symbol for air. Astrology is so related in many ways to alchemy. Many of the great alchemists were often astrologers, and they knew these symbols like the back of their hand and as part of their work. So this is the time-honored symbol for air. It's a triangle pointing upward, and it has the little bar going across at the top. And this color is chosen specifically because this is one of the colors for air. Yellow is one of the colors for air. White is another, and light blue is another. So this air symbol, even though Aquarius is carrying its vessel of water, it's an air sign, as I said. So it tells us that our next job as astrologers and all humans, all earthlings on this planet, is working with the air element. I recently visited an alchemical garden and exhibit, and I have some images I want to share with you about that to help inspire some of the thinking we might all be able to do related to this. This is a panel that is in this alchemy exhibit that I went to go see. This can be seen out in California in San Jose at the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. They have an entire exhibit about alchemy. And this panel talks about the importance of air and what the alchemists would have been doing. Air is about separating things. It figures very prominently in this is the third stage of the 7-stage of alchemy. And separation is something that strains or sifts or cuts away or evaporates the ingredients that are currently joined, but we separate them to discard whatever is unwanted and keep only what is pure to reveal its essence. In the garden at Rosicrucian Park, not only do they have this show, but they actually installed this garden. You can see part of what I'm getting at. You can see these triangles here and see how they have the lines through them. This is air to the right with the white stones, and this is earth to the left with the brown stones. We've got water up at top left and fire up at top right. This garden, if you ever have a chance to go see it, I highly, highly recommend it. This park is open. You can just go there and walk around it. It was dedicated at the winter solstice in 2014. And each of these planters has the shape of the element symbol. So all 4 elements are brought together. It's really great for astrologers. And see this little circle in the center? That is the symbol for the quintessence. That is the thing that's even higher, the thing we're all trying to connect to. Each of these planters contains herbs associated with its element, and the borders are filled with tumbled, recycled glass in a color that's chosen specifically to work for the element. So you can see here for this air planter, they chose white. So I want to show you some pictures that I took on the ground, feet on the ground at this location. So here's one. I was so tickled when I came across this. I was just wandering around. I wasn't even thinking about this presentation. I hadn't written it yet. This is 5 years ago. Look carefully. You can see the triangle here in this metal planter, but if you look really closely, you can see the air symbol. It's actually cut into the metal, in addition to being in the larger garden itself. And you can see at right and left, the white stones. And then this was taken after the garden was planted and had matured by then. Here's another one from the park. And this is a wonderful metaphor, I think, for what we're experiencing right now. This is a path in the garden. At left is the earth element. This is the brown tumbled stones. And then on the right is the white tumbled stones. If you think about it, with this air mutation, the shift from earth to air, that's what we're doing right now. We've made this shift from 200 years of grand conjunctions in earth to now 200 in air. And whenever there's a shift, of course, there's a bit of transition time. So it's kind of fun to think about literally walking down the path of life, earth on the one hand, air on the other. I've got a couple more little pictures for you. This is the air section itself. You can see how nicely the plants have grown in. And again, here's all the white stones over here. This is a really interesting garden too, because they've gone to zero energy use, net usage, as well as putting in all plants that can handle any drought so that they don't have to use a lot of water resources for it. Highly recommended. There's an astrologer I wanted to mention to you from the early 20th century, and this is regarding the sense of earth. This is a book plate that was used by a man named Harvey Spencer Lewis. He went by H. Spencer Lewis or Spencer Lewis. He's known now as the founder of the modern form of the Rosicrucian order, to just tie these two things together. But he's also an astrologer, especially very early in his career. And he wrote various books that allude to this. Anyway, if you look at his book plate, you can see the book within the book plate. And it says a line from the Old Testament, and God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. As astrologers, that gives us an indication of just how pivotal, just how important air is. This was a person, he's gone now, he died in 1939, but he regarded air as indispensable. Air is life. And that is when you take your first breath, the soul comes in. That is when we time a birth chart as astrologers. With the last breath, the soul leaves. So also what's interesting about air is it's the one element we can't see. So we can see fire, we can see a flame, we can see water, we can look at earth and walk around on it. But air, basically, we can't see. Maybe we might see air bubbles trapped in ice, for example, but in general, we don't see it. What we see are the effects of it. So, you know, we can breathe in, we feel it. As you were dancing around to the Age of Aquarius music, you could feel it, air circulating. But in general, it's this invisible thing. So it has the sense of mystery that appeals to so many of us as astrologers, and in general, anybody who's interested in astrology. It gives us some of the beauty of reminding us about, you know, the intangibility of the sky, the stars. You know, we do our best, but Earth, the intelligence, you know, the connection we'll have, and genius downloads, if you will, that come to us will really help us. A few more comments regarding air. We'll go back to the symbol. So here we are with the alchemical symbol again. It's the yellow and the white together, really giving us a double air sense. So in astrology, air governs the mind and all forms of communication. And mystically, air is the word with a capital W. So it's this active heavenly principle. It's also sometimes seen as the dove. Birds, big symbol for anything air, as well as the Holy Spirit. So just as communication links us as people, and that's what I was talking about before. If you look at this, here's two interesting beings together that don't look like they fit. It's a woman and a skeleton, and I call this the conversation. We are in relationship to everything in creation. And so it's very Aquarian in a sense. Here's two things that don't really quite fit together, but we got to mash them together and figure out how to make it work, which is very much an Aquarian task. And actually, if you've heard the original version of the Age of Aquarius song, it's actually mashed together with that song, Let the Sun In, you know, the sunshine, Let the Sunshine In. And they are sort of almost ham-fistedly jammed together. But isn't that an interesting Aquarian thing? We're just going to put them together and make it work. So here's our air symbol. What we get from this is linking each other through communication, through thought, through relationship, which is going to be all the air signs, you know, working us through this. It's also the link between heaven and earth. And it gives us that constant communion with what is perhaps higher, or the invisible realms, or the stars even. And so of the four directions as well, each of the elements is associated with one of them, and air is associated with east, quote, whence cometh the light, unquote, as mystics, astrologers, and initiates always remind us. After last year, one of the things to remember is air is bringing us some needed lightness after a difficult time. And so balloons and colors, they remind us of the lightness of being, the bright colors, very much in line with Gemini here, the blue sky, very much connected to Libra as well as Aquarius. Air has this association with the springtime, with youthfulness and optimism. And so it's nice to look forward to some lighter energies, even though we continue to deal with things such as
my other half.
even though we continue to deal with things such as Pluto and Capricorn, continuing to give us some heaviness, as well as it's the interesting developments we're getting economically with Uranus in Taurus. So this airy quality can make it easier for our hopes and dreams and wishes, all very Aquarian things, to start to take flight. As we learn as astrologers, and as we learn just as 21st century people about the idea of manifestation, to make anything manifest, we need to do the work on the inner plane, visualize it, imagine it, make it happen on this inner plane, and then let it go and release it and trust that it's going to manifest at the right time. Let the air currents, the currents of thought take it and start to crystallize around it. So this is the time during this Aquarian Leap period. So let go of outcome and trust that they will manifest at the right time in the perfect form and give us what is needed. a little bit about Uranus and air. So I have a symbol for those who need it. Here's the Uranus symbol. Electric blue, a wonderful color that goes with the sign Aquarius. So I want to suggest, just imagine Uranus up there with all the other planets. And whenever you start to create things, whenever you release a thought or a hope or something for manifestation, picture it doing a flyby of Uranus, just like these probes that NASA has sent out. Just picture that and give it a bit of Aquarian and Uranian life, to really inspire yourself and remind yourself of your hopes, dreams, and wishes and how important they are for all of us to really honor those and connect them with air and with the sky. Uranus is named for Uranos, a Greek word. It's the ancient Greek sky god. And this planet is famous for its very beautiful bluish color, sometimes looking sky blue, sometimes turquoisey. And these two colors also remind us of Aquarius's air element, these bluey things like the wild blue yonder, if you will. And they reinforce this sense of detachment and this very strongly intellectual approach to life. Uranus has this tipped rotational axis. It looks like it's spinning on its side. So just imagine if you were walking around like this all the time, what things would look like and how your perspective would change by looking at it sideways. So this really corresponds to the Aquarian tendency to look at the world in very unique ways, to march to the beat of their own drummers, and really to embrace strangeness and difference in others, very much as we see in this image of the lady with the skeleton. What will she choose? Oh my. I also wanted to show a couple of images from culture and from alchemy. I just showed you Aquarius. I'm actually going to bring it back up so you can see it. I'll make it a little bit smaller so you can look at all of these all together. So look at the similarity between Uranus and the Great Orb. This is one, is I believe, part of the jewels for the British Crown. Look at the similarity with the orb on the bottom and the cross image at the top. We also see this in the alchemical symbols here, antimony, and in particular cinnabar. These are very interesting mystical images, as well as alchemical ones. This is an alchemical chart that I found. And if you see, here's all of our wonderful familiar planetary symbols on this top row, starting with Mercury, Venus, etc., going all the way through all of the different things. This gives us a hint of looking at Uranus and Aquarius and getting a sense of what that means. This idea, if you will, of growing into our personal royalty in a way, as well as looking at some of the higher meanings for it. So we also get the sky imagery with the beauty of Aquarius, with the beauty of Uranus. One of the things that also is related to this is we get a great deal of power. Aquarius has associations with the sky and electricity, and it's both physical and spiritual electricity. So just like an electrical storm brings us lightning flashes in a darkened sky, we can experience Aquarius's power on the spiritual plane as sudden awakenings. And I would suggest that in the age of Aquarius, that's going to become a whole lot more frequent. If you're not already sensing that, it may start to happen for you, especially if you're priming the pump by studying these sorts of things and really tuning into it through meditation. It can really give these flashes of brilliance, and that gives us the association of Aquarius with genius. This can also be seen for anybody here who might study Kabbalah. You can see this in the tree of life that looks like a lightning pattern, a bolt of lightning coming down. Now, one of the challenges that we face with this is, as well, just the very jaggedness of this energy. So the glyph for Aquarius is two things, these two arrow-like sorts of things, very hard edges here. And this is sort of the sharpness that we can get of Aquarius as well as Uranian energy. This is electricity, which frankly is dangerous if it's not grounded and it's not really respected. And so what does it feel like when we get these jolts of inspiration? Well, sometimes it feels like this. Oh my goodness, like you put your finger into a light socket. You know, the intensity that we get of Aquarius, the intensity that we get of Uranian flashes. And so when this happens, it's sudden, it's jolting. It can be really bracing and super exciting, except it's really hard on the nervous system, which is one of the things that Aquarius rules. So to make the most of this Aquarius energy, we all need to take really good care of our nervous systems. And those of us who consult with clients need to help them do the same and remind them about the importance of nutrition and grounding and lots of rest. So it's important to stay connected to nature as well. Earth, we've just gone through 200 years of Earth with the grand conjunctions. Now that can really help us with some grounding about how are we going to work with air? Well, we can't stay in our heads all the time. We got to get our feet on the ground. So regular habits, pure food and water, all the stuff your mom told you if you were listening when you were little, regular meals. So it's really good to ground these electrical flashes of insight too. Get them down on paper as soon as you can, jot them down. I'd like to suggest that the other thing that's going to be so important during this period is to remember, here's Leo. Remember Aquarius's other half. Right across the zodiac is Leo. These are united by the fact that one's air and one's fire, so they're both so-called, active signs, or in the old parlance, masculine signs. Leo reminds us of the heart, and it reminds us of feeling and emotion, and that is the thing that Leo can really do for us, is to remind us of the nobility of the emotions and how to somehow marry emotion with thought to bring Aquarius in here, in this heart. I have a quote I want to share with you. Those of us who live in the United States are lucky because we have the Statue of Liberty, and that is such a beautiful symbol, such an important symbol. And my paper's moved around. I hope to find it. Here we go. At the Statue of Liberty, there is a poem by Emma Lazarus that's put up, and it's familiar to most of us. Parts of it about, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. It's a very, in some respects, Aquarian quality about, welcoming people. It's also very Cancerian. We're in the time of Cancer, and that, the United States being Cancerian nation. So this is from the poem it's a sonnet called The New Colossus, which Emma Lazarus wrote. In that same sonnet, here's some lines she wrote. She spoke of the Statue of Liberty as a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. That gives us an even stronger connection to Aquarius, a stronger connection to this Uranian quality. Imprisoned lightning, my goodness, what could be clearer in terms of this lightning quality of this vibration? Mother of Exiles, aliens, alienation, very much associated with the qualities of Aquarius. I did put a symbol together that I wanted to share with you. So what if you imagine, here we go here's Uranus in your heart. If we bring these head energies into the heart, or align these two, we give ourselves a very good opportunity to merge these two signs in a way that helps us make our leap into a new age, that not leave behind the heart, to make it part of this work, to make all feel welcome, to end the feeling of exile and alienation, which is a big part of our next era astrologically and just as a planet. So in this respect, it seems to me that we are now called to the Aquarian ideals. Part of making this Aquarian leap is to do the work ourselves as astrologers so we can help others do it as well, who understands these symbols better than we do. And so it's likely that because of these shifts, we're going to see our evolution accelerate. I think many of us can feel life speeding up in so many ways. And astrology can really help manage these new warp speeds. Aquarius is going to help us work through this as well as we understand the symbols and we know how to help counsel people move beyond the head to really integrate the various elements. And the planet Uranus, you know, this astrologer I mentioned earlier to you, Spencer Lewis, called it the star of astrology. As we know, it's associated with our profession. And this planet in the sign Aquarius, they oversee it. And you've seen during this presentation how helpful astrology is to take a different look at cycles, to understand the longer view, to be helping with really a long-term view of culture and society and humanity. It's also a really powerful tool in the here and now for our self-development. And so by studying our personal astrology, seeing where we have Uranus, where do we have Aquarius, what cusp is it on? It puts us in a very interesting position to help others. It's also par excellence, the energy that help us do that thing that was really mandated in the ancient world over the Apollo at Delphi. Know thyself, it's said in Greek. Genius is already in the air. It's going to be in the air. We're going to get these instant downloads. It's going to feel like lightning flashes through our bodies. And so we can really develop not only ourselves, but help other people. And so I wanted to share with you at this point, this idea that every sign is associated with a phrase. And we astrologers learn these phrases, but I will list this again. For Aquarius, that phrase is, I know. And we can express this energy negatively if we assume that we know best or impose a vision of utopia on other people or rely only on information from outer sources and authorities instead of our own inner knowing. At its best, I know represents an inner spiritual knowing, the gnosis, Gnosis, the gnosis gained from inspiration and intuition. And verified with our own reflection, meditation, and through our own experience. This is where all of us need to bring what we have and what we learn in our own revelations. Now is the time to tap our inner knowing, to drink very deeply of Aquarian wisdom, and then share what we know to help others. And if we take up this task, we will personally come to feel and know at a soul level why Aquarius's ruler, Uranus, that mythical god who rules the vast sky, is known as the Great Awakener. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing, and we have our guided meditation to do in a little bit, but I would very much like to see if there are any comments or questions or thoughts anybody would like to share before we do that.
Well, I would just like to point out that I saw on the news recently, excuse me, I don't know exactly what the date was, but France just sent a smaller replica of the Statue of Liberty recently. So that puts a punctuation point on all that Aquarian represents and upgrading it even. I mean, where did that come from? It's kind of interesting.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. And I believe France is a Leo country.
Ah, how cool. I had not heard that. Thank you for sharing that. I also see there's a comment. Chuck, you had a comment in here about the Uranus symbol, the destruction of the kingship symbol.
Yeah, I just find it fascinating when you showed me that the symbol is really the symbol of the kingship taken apart.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And think about it, for the last several hundred years, it's been a revolution mindset, right? And if you think about today, the kingship of the world is America. not directly, but you know, the way we act.
And it's going to be so interesting to see when we get that triple conjunction with the Pluto return next year. It's going to hit 3 times exactly, as we as astrologers all know. So the reckoning is coming, Chuck. We're going to have to straighten up and fly right.
I would like to comment on the conjunction that happened in '62 and the aspects opposition to Uranus in Leo and Pluto in Virgo, and then the square to Neptune. Now, some people think, I know Ted, we talked about this, that either Pluto or Neptune represents race. And that was also the beginning of the racial riots. And it's sort of brought it to a head at this time. And we're up with the Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, that is going to hopefully be a key in that lock and raise it to the next level. Of course, we're in the chaos of it now. And hopefully with the Pluto return, there'll be some reckoning, but I think it's going to be rather messy. But I just wanted to point out the similarity of what was going on now, then and how it relates to what's going on now, and bringing it up to speed. Yay.
Yeah, freedom means freedom for everybody.
Right.
And I think your point's well taken as well, Ronnie, that what happened in the 60s in particular with so much liberation happening, I'm thinking particularly of areas in Africa that gained their independence from colonialism. Some of the dominoes started to fall at that time, as well as some of the shift towards pushing even harder for women's rights, as well as Stonewall coming in 1969. So we did see some of the promise start to play out, as well as what led to the women's movement in the 70s, really gaining a lot of traction.
Good.
Any other thoughts or questions perhaps that anybody might have? If you have other thoughts that you'd like to share, please place them in the chat. If there is nothing else, I'd like to take you on the guided meditation to make your Aquarian leap. Oh, yes.
I got a question.
Chuck, yes.
So in the 62 chart you showed,
yeah,
Uranus was opposing all that Aquarian energy, which is kind of bizarre. Did you notice that Uranus was opposite of all the guys bunched up in the Aquarian sign?
And over there in Leo, which is going to be so important to leavening this, this head thing, so that we don't just go to being, a tech society or all IT, that we somehow bring these two into a harmony.
Or is it that Uranus is going to be the king and what Uranus is revolution?
Well, we have a lot of authority about all this. What would you like to see? And I do think, what we literally, so there's an old saying, I think it's French, but I don't know the original French, but in English it says, what is well conceived can be easily executed. And so part of our work is to conceive, not just, looking at problems, but what would we like to see? What do we really wish for? What is this utopia that was talked of and dreamed of? What does it really look like? Because the better we can get at that, the easier it is to actually manifest it.
Just go hug a tree in Asheville, that's all.
Which is such a lovely visualization. I like that a lot. I happen to be very fond of tree time.
I also think there's an opportunity to blend the Aquarian unity. I like that word that you created, the siblinghood, the unification and the dropping of boundaries. And we see that with the transgender movement now. So people have to open their heart and change their mental construct of what. So that's another huge shift, Aquarian shift, in my opinion.
And certainly those air signs will help us coin new words. And in fact, many of you probably already know this, that Aquarius and Uranus in particular is associated with neologisms, new words. And we sure need some more because our thinking is shifting so much that the vocabulary in many respects doesn't exist yet for it. But how cool that we get this opportunity we get to make it up and not only conceive it by what does it look like, but what do we want to call it? We get to do the naming.
He, her, them.
Maybe pronouns will go away. It's just gonna be really interesting to see. I mean, we're already into it. It's very fun. So if there is nothing else, I'd like to take you on an adventure. If you like, would you all like to go on a guided meditation for a moment? Oh, say yes, please say. Oh, I see some nods, yes. Okay, cool. Super fun. Okay, so to do this, what I'm going to suggest is just sort of move your papers to the side and just sort of sit, because we're going to actually do this by closing our eyes. It's going to be a little closed eye meditation. I'm going to guide you on a magical mystery tour adventure time. If you want, I'm going to show you, let me share the screen for just a second. I'll show you this image. Take another look at, just imagine yourself out there. This is the Helix Nebula, but looks like a big old eye. So just imagine, unify your eyes with this Helix Nebula eye. Pretend you're out in outer space, maybe. Just start to catch the vibe. And then, okay. So let's just get comfy, however you like to be for a guided meditation. Okay. Now this experiment, this exercise, it has to do with the idea of Aquarius as this thing that has to do with time and paradox. So Aquarius is in part about the one and the many. So it's the unique individual and then friendship and acquaintances. It's also about the antique, because Aquarius loves stuff that's really, really long time ago, as well as what's futuristic, way in the future, as well as, so the distant past, the far future, super old things from culture, as well as really modernistic. And then this really interesting concept of bending time. We get it in sci-fi, we get it in time travel, we get it in projection. It's this idea of the Ouroboros. The end is the beginning. And when we reach that, we reach universal cosmic consciousness. So let's get cosmic. Okay, now take a deep breath, close your eyes, just relax. Let's go on our ride. Okay, here we are in 2021 on planet Earth. So just imagine you have just conceived and manifested your personal space-time travel ship. It is the perfect ship for you. It looks so cool and you cannot wait to get into it. So open the ship and step into it and buckle up, lock things down and get ready. And it's such a magical space-time ship that all you have to do is think it and you can come up off the ground. So you've now left the ground. You are now hovering in the air. Okay, as you hover in the air, start traveling, gear it up, kick it up, go faster and faster. We're going back in time and back in space. You're traveling farther back to 1623. Oh, wow, that was that last cool grand conjunction. Okay, back to 1405, the last one in Aquarius. You're going faster and faster and back and back. It's down around the year 0. Now you're back 2000 BC, faster and faster and faster. You're now at 5000 BC, 10,000 BCE, 12,000. Oh my goodness, you're going faster and faster. Now you're at 18,000 BCE, 20,000, 22. And now you start to slow a little bit. You're in 24,000 BCE. You're hovering over the earth. Figure out a place to just land, a place in time within this space. You are 26,000 years ago to the time of the last Aquarian Age. Feel yourself in this time and you light down someplace. The earth doesn't look quite the same as it did from where you came from because the continents are kind of different. Civilizations look different, but you get out of your spaceship and part of your magic is you've got this invisibility cloak. They can't see you, but you can see them. And you walk around and you look at this and you get a sense of the culture back then. Just take a minute to feel what that feels like. Have that experience. And now get a sense of what that culture was like and their high ideals, the hopes and the wishes and the dreams that humans had the last time we were in an age of Aquarius. And get a sense of what worked then and then what might not have worked so well. If you think you were back then, get a sense of you all those years ago, 26,000 years ago. What are the things you did right? And then what are the things that maybe you didn't do so well at, that didn't quite work out for you, and that maybe caused some problems? Just take that knowledge in, even if you don't know it in your conscious mind right now. Feel your way into it. Give yourself a chance to sense it. Just sense the vibration of it. Take a deep breath. Exhale. And thank all those people walking around, one of whom might be you. Thank them for the work they did on this planet 26,000 years ago, what they did with the Aquarian and Uranian energies. And feel that gratitude in your heart, and then step back into your space-time ship. Buckle yourself back on. We got to get going. Roll forward, lift off, go forward in time. Going. You're now at 22,000 BCE, 20,000, 18,000, 16,000, faster and faster and faster. 10,000 BCE, 5,000 BCE, hovering around the start of that Pisces age, shoving forward. It's 500 of this era, 1,000, 1,200, 1,600. Now we're at 2021. Hover over now. Get this feeling of you now. Feel your connection to your distant past as a person who's human, regardless of whether you were there then. Feel your connection to humanity then and now. And now rev it up, kick it up high. We're going to go fast into the future. Go forward, faster and faster and faster. We're at 4,000. We're towards the end of this new Aquarian age. Now we're at 6,000, we're at 8,000, 10,000, 12,000. Keep going faster and faster and faster. You're at 16,000, 20,000, 24,000. Start to ease back. We're at 28,000 a year, 26,000 years in the future. And now just hover over planet Earth again and feel the change in vibration from what was accomplished during this time in 2021 and the next 2,000 years. Look back at your current you from your future you. Thank yourself for incarnating at this time and doing this really important work. And now think about, what does current you need to do so that future you will be so delighted and so thrilled at the great grounding, the great work, the great accomplishments, and the golden age achieved by human people? What are the mistakes from the past you also need to overcome from 2 Aquarian ages ago? Tuck that into your heart. Just hold it in your head and your heart. Get a sense of this wonderment that you have, that you can time travel within yourself at any moment, and remind yourself that these long are as nothing. You can slip easily from one to the other to check in with yourself on the soul level, your evolution level. Feel a sense of gratitude in the future. And now go back, get back in your space-time ship, and start zipping up, buckling up, and travel back to 2021. You're moving through the thousands of years, almost in the blink of an eye, because that's part of our gift, speed of thought. And you find yourself now in 2021. Take a deep breath. Let your space-time ship touch down to right where you are now. And then just ease back. Take a breath. Take a moment. Breathe deeply a couple times. Feel what you just experienced. You might have gotten something consciously, but you might not have, but you might have gotten a feeling or an impression. So take a moment right now. When you're ready, open your eyes and just jot down a little bit about what came to you, what you experienced. Just take a moment right now. I'll give you a few minutes to do that, just a couple of minutes here. Go gently. Aquarian energy is jarring. Just take your time. And as you come back to yourself and you open your eyes, feel a sense of gratitude to the energy of Uranus and Aquarius and the privilege of studying and practicing astrology. Jot down a few thoughts of what you experienced. Just take a moment to do that. As we come back to ourselves, I want to share with you another quote. And this is from Harriet Tubman. We were speaking earlier about freedom. She said that when she achieved her freedom, she wrote, "I had crossed the line. I was free. But there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in a strange land." And we may very well feel that way at times. And the joy of astrology is helping us to overcome that and learn ourselves and teach others how to overcome that alienation that can come. And to remember our dreams and to help others do the same. Because Harriet Tubman also said, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world. May we make it so. And that concludes my presentation. If there is anything that the officers of Asheville Friends of Astrology would like to say or need to say, I leave it to our fearless leaders.
I would just like to remind everybody to please make a donation to Anne. The link is on the chat. And I love that you quoted Captain Picard from Star Trek. That was "Make It So." That was very Aquarian, fabulous. Thank you, Anne. Beautiful, beautiful talk.
Thank you so much. And thank you again to everyone who has been with us tonight and made me feel so welcome. Thank you, everyone. I bid you a wonderful night, and I thank you all for everything.
Thank you very much.
Anne.
It was great.
Peace and love.
Thank you, Anne. Great presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, everybody. I loved it, and I loved meeting all of you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.